Hi there, this is Tracy Kiernan, and this acrylic painting tutorial is going to show you how to paint a Jolly Santa Claus with acrylics on a canvas that is pre-painted black. So when we're working on a black canvas, I actually like to use mess-up paintings for this, so I'll take this apple barrel black paint and do one coat with a flat brush, and it's enough to cover the painting. I like that it dries in a matte finish for this. It just looks nicer, I think, than using a satin black, but you can use a satin black if you want to. The Liquitex Basics colors that I use will dry in a satin finish, so it just kind of helps the painting to pop a little bit when it's satin against a matte background. Let's go over brushes. So we'll be using this number 12 bright brush. It's a Royal and Langnickel brush. This is a Princeton Velvet Touch brush. It's a number 4 round brush. And then some other fun details in this. This is a round kind of bristle brush, and I'm using that for the texture on the Santa hat and the Santa sleeves, and then a toothbrush to do some splattered dots all over the painting to give it that fun kind of sparkle look. And colors, there's a lot of colors in this painting. So Cad Red Medium, Light Blue Permanent, Cadmium Yellow Light Hue, Naples Yellow. These are Liquitex Basics paints, and you can use whatever colors, whatever brand you have available. Mars Black, Titanium White, Phthalo Blue, and Light Pink. And then I use paper plates for palettes, but you can use whatever palette you like to use, and a mason jar, cup for water so we can rinse our paints, and then a couple other things that I'll be using for this. I did some outlining details with this, so I used a white POSCA and a black POSCA paint pen. So the white one is actually a very fine tip, and I also recommend the very fine tip for the black. However, mine wasn't working, so we're going to use this other one that's kind of a medium fine tip, but it still worked out. Outlining details are optional if you don't like the look of some outlining. Sometimes it helps get some of the things in our painting to really kind of pop when we outline them, but if you don't have a paint pen or if you don't want to outline things, you don't have to. And a white piece of chalk for drawing Santa. I'm going to start with my 11 by 14 canvas that I have pre-painted with black, and I'm going to use a piece of chalk to find the center of the canvas. So it's an 11 by 14, so 5.5 inches, make a little dot. That's just for the center point, doesn't matter exactly where that dot is, but this dot right here is 8 inches from the bottom edge of the canvas. So that is where Santa's nose is going to be. So we have a little bit of a guideline of how to start this drawing. So 8 inches, and then the width of the nose is about 1.5 inches wide, so you can kind of measure that. I throw these measurements out there, but you don't have to use these exact measurements. It's just kind of helpful. And then after drawing an oval nose, we're going to do Santa's mustache. So we're going to do a kind of a curved line that goes outwards and curves back down. Relatively the same size and symmetrical. So rather wide mustache. Look at how much space we have left on the left and the right side of this. Have about 1 inch of space left on each side of that mustache. And then 2 little curved lines below that for his mouth. Head's going to be a little bit awkward, but we're going to do this kind of hill shape. And his hat is kind of draped over. So I'm going to kind of repeat that line again. I'm actually going to bring that bottom line down a little bit. So this is the lining of Santa's hat. And then we're going to go up. When I paint this, the hat is actually going to get a little bit shorter, so we can adjust this later. Down, and then a circle shape for the end of the hat. So look at the location of that circle shape. It's just under the right side of his mustache, and it really takes up, goes all the way to the right edge of the canvas. Then I'm going to do his beard. So big kind of teardrop shape, goes down to a point. A lot of this is going to be covered by his present that he's holding, but we want to draw that entire shape anyway. So it goes all the way to the bottom edge of the canvas. And then we have his arms that are kind of coming down and do two kind of curved shapes on each side. And then his mittens. So the mittens are kind of going, they're facing together because he's holding a present, thumb on top, and you have a small curve for the thumb, big curve for the hands, so very simple mitten shape. And you have his sleeves, that kind of the lining on his sleeves. And then I'm going to take this curved line. Right here we have his coat, so two diagonal lines that just go down and off the edge of the canvas. And we can start drawing the present. So a little rectangle on the top of his thumbs. It's for the top of the box. And then this part goes down. You might have a little slither of space right below the present. I did. Or if it's easier, you can just have it go all the way to the bottom edge of the canvas. And then there's a little bow. You can draw the little bow on top, or the ribbon is a little rectangle shape, and then the bow is a little square shape with two kind of triangular shapes, and then the eyes. So if you need to kind of adjust your drawing, you can. When we paint this in, we can always adjust this later. Chalk will erase with a wet paint brush, or you can use a soft baby wipe. Just don't press too hard to erase if you're using the baby wipe, because you don't want to lift off any of the layer of black paint. I'm just going in and kind of adjusting the drawing. So if you do need to erase, you can take a brush. This is just a regular flat brush, clean water, and then you can go and clean up some of your lines. Adjust this sleeve over here on the left so it's a little bit higher, and then erase that. And when you are done with the drawing portion, we're going to start painting Santa in, and you will need white paint to start out with. White paint and a number 4 round brush. So we're going to be painting his mustache and beard first. So I'm going to load my number 4 round brush in white. The nice thing about using the black canvas is we can utilize that black background as part of kind of the shadowing and texture in his mustache. So as I'm painting this in, I'm doing kind of these paint strokes that are kind of curvy, loose paint strokes. Sometimes it helps to just kind of outline the shape, but look at the edging. The edging just kind of loose lines, loose dashed lines. But you can leave some of that black still showing through, and that starts to create a little bit of texture in the mustache. So you want to go ahead and do that to both sides of the mustache. Again, loose, kind of curvy paint strokes, and leave a little bit of that black from the background still showing through. We're going to do the same thing for the beard. So I'm going to take my round brush and start painting this in. So on this side of the beard, these paint strokes are curving this way. On this side of the beard, they're curving the opposite way. Under the mouth, just kind of outline the bottom part of his lip and do your paint strokes and drag them downwards, kind of in a vertical direction in the center, and then switch directions from curved marks. Same with under the mustache, just kind of outline under the mustache and then do your curved strokes. You want to leave a little slither of kind of this black from the background showing through under the mustache. So you can see that kind of line and division of where the mustache starts and where the beard is. As we're painting the beard in, it's okay to go outside the lines. We will end up having to kind of touch this up later to do some texture on the outer parts, but we need to do that after we paint the sleeve. I am going to cover up some of this bow and even the top part of the present. So most of this bow is going to disappear just to allow anything like around the bow or around the present to still show that beard behind it. So we got to paint over it first. And then again, I am leaving some of that black background still showing through. It shows that kind of the dark parts of the beard. I am going to add black to my paint palette next, and I'm going to go back and add black texture into this. If you're simplifying this painting, you actually don't have to do this step, but I'm taking this black. I'm just going to paint a little outline under the mustache and then drag this down. This is going to create a little bit of shadowing under his mustache, and it really allows that part to stand out a little bit better. So you just kind of outline the under part of that shape and then drag your paint strokes down in that little direction, the direction that the beard hairs are going. So opposite on each side. And the same for the mouth, just kind of outline the under part of his mouth and then kind of drag those paint strokes down. So this black is actually blending a little bit with that white. It's turning into kind of a gray color. And then just kind of blending it a little bit right here. So it's kind of black and then it kind of goes to gray and then down into the rest of the beard, which is white. And it's okay if this part of the beard is a little bit gray. It's a little shadowy since the present is going to be on top of it anyway. I am adding a little bit more black gray texture into the mustache, just doing little bits of black on my brush with white and just going back over and kind of adding more of that kind of darker texture into the mustache, but I'm not going to detail it much further. I'm going to switch to the number 12 bright brush, which is like a 1/2 inch flat brush, and I'm going to use this to paint this circle. So we are going to texture this later on, but this is just the first layer. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to create some shadow in this, and that's going to help us later when we texture it. So I'm going to start by painting it solid white, just a solid white circle. And then before it dries, add just a teeny bit of black to the corner of your brush and blend it in on the left side of that circle so you have kind of a medium gray color on the far left end of that circle. Blend it in. If you need to, add a little bit more black just on the edge. So you're making kind of a 3-dimensional circle sphere shape. And we're going to do the same thing to the bottom lining of his hat. So if there's too much black or gray on your brush, you can rinse it off and start over. But I'm just going to kind of deal with the gray that's on my brush already. So you want to go ahead and outline the shape of this bottom lining of the hat so it kind of hugs the top of his head. Use the full width of the brush to paint that whole kind of arc shape in. And if your chalk drawing got a little bit messy, it's okay. You can just kind of adjust the way you want, and any leftover chalk will erase when we're done. So painting this all solid white, and we'll do the shading thing for this as well. So when you're ready for shading, add a teeny bit of black to the corner of your brush and blend it in on the bottom part of the hat. That'll create a little shadowy area on the bottom. And if your hat ends up overlapping part of the mustache, you can leave it like that or decide that your mustache is overlapping the hat. You can kind of adjust that later. Blending this in so the hat, or this part of the hat, is lighter at the top and darker at the bottom. Again, when you're doing the black, you only want to load little tiny bits of that black just on the corner of the brush and let it blend. If you end up adding too much, you can just kind of wipe the brush off. And we're going to do the same thing to the ends of his sleeves, but this time I'm going to rinse the brush off and kind of start over. So this time, we're going to do white again, start with just the white, outline the shape. Again, it's okay to adjust your drawing if needed. And then the other one. So these are going in a curved direction, and these would technically be outlining any part of the beard, but we can always adjust that later. And then you're shading, little bit of black on the corner of the brush, and I'm doing the shadow part closest to the mitten, so the bottom of the sleeve, and then blend it in so the sleeve is lighter on the edge, the top edge. Next, let's load our paint palette with Cadmium Red Medium, and this is the color we'll use for Santa's hat and sleeves and coat. So I'm going to use the 12 bright brush. It's all cleaned off, and I'm using just the red right now. So my red is showing up. If you are using maybe a different brand of paint, or for some reason it's not showing up, you can add just a little bit of white to that, and it will kind of boost that color to get it to show up better. You could also pre-paint the hat white, let it dry, and then paint red over it. But for me, this red is showing up, and I kind of like the fact that that dark part of the canvas is kind of showing through a little bit, gives it a little bit of shadow in the hat. I did make my hat shorter. I'm using the full width of the brush to do kind of these curved strokes to get that bulk of the hat. And when you paint in curved direction, it kind of gives that hat a little bit more shape. And then right here, I'm painting the part of the hat that kind of folds down, and same kind of thing. You can just kind of outline the shape and then fill it in. Kind of defining that edge right there of the hat, but leaving a lot of black shadowy area over here where it folds over. I don't really want to lose that shape, that little line that divides where the front part of the hat is and where the fold is. So like right here, we don't want to lose that, even though this ended up just being solid red. So if yours turned solid red, that's fine. I am going to, without rinsing the brush, grab a little bit of black on the corner of the brush. I'm going to redo this little line right here where it folds over. So it's about like that. So now we have, that's kind of darker and shadowy. I'm going to blend that in a little bit. Again, only a little tiny bit of black on the corner of the brush to get that shading. Now let's do some more shading. Over here on the left part of the hat, I'm going to take that little bit of black, and this is wet on wet blending, using the full width of the brush, dragging my brush in a curved direction. It gives it that little bit of dark shadowing on the hat, and it's wet on wet, so that red wasn't dry. That little bit of black blended right onto the canvas. I'm going to rinse the brush and do some highlighting next. I don't want to have the black on my brush because it's going to be too much of a gray color. So I'm going to rinse and start over. I'm going to mix this color on my palette. So mix red and white together, about equal parts, maybe a little bit more red than white. So it's kind of a lighter color. And then on the right side of the hat, I'm just going to use the full width of the brush and kind of gently drag paint strokes in a curved direction. And over here on the end of the hat as well, kind of outline the edging of that and kind of drag it in a curved direction. So we have light colors on the right side and dark colors on the left. Gently drag that in. Just be careful not to drag too much of the lighter red into your black, because then it'll get too much of like a grayish red. Next, I'm going to paint Santa's face, and I'm going to use the number 4 round brush for that. I'm going to load my paint palette with light pink and Naples Yellow. I'm going to use a clean and rinsed off number 4 round brush. Take this 12 bright, set it to the side, and I'm going to mix both of those colors together. So equal parts pink and Naples yellow, mix it all together. It might be a little bit more than I actually need. And then we're going to paint the face. So I'm going to paint over the eyes, but around the nose, and it's okay to paint over the eyes because we can just add those in later. And I'm going to do this in a curved direction. So around the nose, if it helps, you can kind of outline the entire shape and then fill it in. And then we want to leave like a little slither of black just below the hat and just above the mustache. Before this dries, I'm going to add white to my brush, and in the center part of the head, I'm going to take this and kind of blend this white in with that color just in the middle part, but leave kind of the outer parts of that shape darker so it's a little bit lighter in the center and gets a little bit more shadowy above the mustache and just under the head. Next, I'm going to make a shadowy color. So I'm going to rinse my brush off and use this same kind of base color, but add just a tiny amount of black. In fact, you need maybe less than like a tiny drop of that black. Mix it together, and it should be just a couple shades darker than that base color. I'm going to take this, I'm actually adding just a teeny bit more black into that, and I want to shadow this right under here. So his hat would be casting a little bit of shadow on the top part of his forehead area. And this part is darker, and I'm just going to kind of blend it in wet on wet, kind of with the rest. And actually, you don't have to blend it in all the way. It could just be like a visible shadow area, and it doesn't have to be a gradient of color that completely blends. And I'm going to rinse this off again. Start doing his nose. So his nose is kind of a rosy color, and we're going to utilize the red to make that rosy color. So I'm going to start with my base color. That's that pink and Naples yellow mixed together. I'm going to add a little bit of white to it to kind of lighten it and add red. So when you add red and white into it, it gives it that pinkish color, and then it gives you that kind of rosy color. So it should be relatively simple, similar to that base color, but just a little bit more rosy. And so you're just going to paint the nose in oval, solid, and we'll do the cheeks. The cheeks are a little bit of a challenge. If you want to skip the cheeks because you're simplifying this painting, you don't have to do the cheeks, but I'll show you how to do that. Same kind of thing, that rosy color. Actually, I'm going to start with more of that base color, and I'm just going to do, so this is that base color with a little bit of that rosy color in it, and you're just doing these kind of two curved bumps just above the mustache, and it's a couple shades darker than the nose, so the nose is a little bit more darker and rosier, and then two bumps for the cheeks. Next, I'm going to paint Santa's sleeves. We're going to go back to the 12 bright brush and our red. This is the Cad Red Medium Hue with nothing else on it, just the red. And I'm going to start painting this in. So I'm going to start over here on the left sleeve. Use the full width of the brush and just drag your paint strokes, the right sleeve too. Drag your paint strokes in a curved direction. When you paint in that curved direction, it gives you that kind of form of the sleeve. But don't worry about covering it completely. It's okay to have some of that black show through. That already helps us with the shadowing. So over here, same thing. Outline, fill it in using full width paint strokes, but you don't need to have 100% coverage. If you need to adjust your chalk drawing, you can. We are going to shade this in the same way that we shaded Santa's hat. So without rinsing the brush, add a little bit of black on the end of the brush and add this kind of gradually, kind of drag it in. So the shadow parts are the parts that are kind of closest to the beard. And then the highlight parts are going to be this parts on the outer parts of this. So I'm actually going to wipe my brush off because there was a little bit too much black on there. So wipe the brush off and I added more red to my brush. And I'm taking that and I'm blending that red into that shadow. So shadow on the inner parts of the sleeve closest to the beard, and our highlight when we do the white, going to be on the outer parts. Add a little tiny bit of white to your brush so it's a lighter color. Technically, I should have rinsed it off because of the little bit of black that was still on my brush, but it ended up being okay. Little tiny bits of white kind of outline the outer edge of that sleeve and then kind of drag it in the center. So you have kind of three different levels of red going on here. You have your light red, your kind of the pure red in the middle, and your dark shadowy red towards the beard. And see how some of that black got in there, but I can blend that out. So if yours is turning too gray or messy, you can always rinse the brush off, start over, and kind of mix your red and white together, what we did earlier with the hat, and then blend that for your lighter color. And that is it for the sleeves. I'm going to go in here and do his coat. So we see this going down at an angle. Without rinsing the brush, I just grab my red and I'm just using the full width of the brush, dragging that color down off the edge of the canvas. If you do your present where you had a little bit of space below that present, you can fill that part in as well with red. Next, I'm going to paint the bottom of Santa's lip, and I'm going to switch back to the number 4 round brush and use that same base color and just paint this curved area right here. The inside of his mouth is going to remain black like the background. And then when this dries, we can highlight it and add kind of a rosy color to his lip, but that's just going to be the first layer. Next, we're going to paint his gloves, and they are going to be black. So it's going to be a little awkward painting black on black. So I'm going to do Mars Black and the 12 Bright brush, and I'm just going to kind of paint this in. So it does show up because this is a satin paint against a matte color, so we can see kind of the black on black, and also it's wet, so you can still kind of see it. I will show you what you can do to this to make it show up a little bit better. We'll use white to kind of highlight the mitten a little bit, and that'll really kind of get that to stand out. But for now, let's just really define the shape. So you have your thumb shape and your big shape, big curved shape for the rest of his fingers, and just pretty much outline the entire shape, fill it in solid black. You can adjust your drying as you're painting this in. And then before that black dries, we're going to kind of do the opposite of what we did when we did a shadowing on the hat. Add a little white to the corner of your brush and then outline the edge of your mitten, and you get a little slither, little light glow on the edge of that, and that really helps that shape to stand out. I'm going to take this a step further and do these kind of loose, straight, angled paint strokes that blend with the white, or blend with the black, but not all the way. So that gives his mitten a little bit of a shiny look. So I'm going to do this on the other mitten as well. Kind of loosely outline the edges and then use the full width of the brush in the center part of your mitten and just do a few kind of curvy paint strokes, expressive paint strokes, but don't overdo it. Just a few in there gives it that kind of fun, shiny look on his mitten. So that really helps that to stand out better instead of it just being pure black. Next, I'm going to take my round brush and I'm going to highlight the nose. So I'm going to load that into white and just do this curved little mark on the top of his nose. So this isn't blending with the color. I'm adding this very lightly, and I added a little bit of white on the bottom and kind of in the center, but if you need to add more pink to your brush to get it to blend a little bit better, you can. And now I'm adding a little bit of white in the middle of his lip and then a little bit of red just to give it kind of a rosy color on the lips. So a little bit of white first and then a little bit of red and add just a little bit of red kind of in the center left part of the lip. Next, we're going to paint the present. So this is the part that's behind his gloves and kind of overlapping his beard. And I chose blue for the present. However, if you want to change the color of this, you can. I'm going to use two different blues for this. I'm going to use light blue permanent and phthalo blue. And I'm using my number 12 bright brush, and I'm going to start by, so if you want to add a little bit of white into this blue to create some color variation, you can, or you can just do it solid. I'm actually going to use my T-square ruler to help me line this up so that this part is going horizontal or perpendicular to the bottom edge of the canvas. And I'm just using the full width of the brush to create that rectangular shape. And it is just above Santa's thumbs, so a narrow rectangle. And if you have a beard area that you need to kind of go back and fix or fill in more beard, you can. So don't worry about filling in the right spots for the present. We can add more beard later. And then the bottom part of the present is going to be dark blue, so that's that phthalo blue color. So if you want, you can paint around the mittens, so you can kind of go in a curved direction, but I'm doing mostly vertical paint strokes. And I didn't rinse the white or the light blue off, so it has some variety and color here, so that some of that light blue is mixing with the dark blue, and it's creating really pretty variation with that blue. So just fill it in, and there's still a little slither of space below the present where we can see Santa's red coat. Don't worry about the ribbon or the bow yet. We can add that later. This is just the first layer, getting that shape defined and filled in. And I like how this light blue blends, so I'm going to add maybe little bits of light blue in there and kind of blend that in a little bit. Kind of gives it that shiny wrapping paper look. I'm going to go back and adjust the top part of the present. Some of that darker blue got mixed into that lighter blue, but that's okay. And so I can fill in, I know there's going to be a bow up here, but I want to just fill in the rest of that beard. So when I do the bow, there's not going to be any background still showing through. So I'm just taking my white and kind of just dragging it up in this area to fill in that part of the beard. And it's okay if we still have some canvas still showing through. If I want to, I can go back and kind of touch up all of the beard, but I don't want to lose that shading and texture in there. Next, assuming the red coat is dry, it should be by now, I'm going to paint a black belt, and so we can see part of Santa's belt going from here, goes behind the present so we don't see the buckle, but just a black line, the width of that brush, about a ½ inch wide. With the black, it curves down, kind of disappears. You can even have it go under here. Next, I'm going to clean up my chalk lines. I'm going to get my brush all rinsed off. Ideally, you want to use clean water for this, but it worked out anyway. So I'm just going to use a clean brush, rinsed off, and that's erasing the chalk. The dark water line will disappear after all of this dries. And I recommend you pretty much drying your entire painting next, because we're going to go in and do details on it, and details where we really just need everything dry right now. I am going to touch up his rosy cheeks by adding a little bit more rosy color to them. So I have a number 4 round brush and I'm using the red and maybe mix a little bit of that peach color with the red so it's not super bright dark red, and just a little bit just on the top edge of his cheeks, just a little bit, and then kind of blend it down into the rest of the cheeks. So just kind of loosely outlining that edge, blending it down, other cheek as well. Again, mixing some of that peach color into the red will kind of make it more of a rosy color. And then blend that down so the cheek is darker at the top and then it gets lighter towards the bottom. I'm going to rinse and highlight this. So rinse and load just the white. And just do a little white circle kind of in the middle of the cheek, each cheek, and then maybe a few little white kind of dots on the left part of the nose, kind of exaggerate that highlight a little bit more on the nose. And then the eyes. So the eyes are black, and if this is more helpful to do with a paint pen, you can draw these in with a paint pen or kind of draw them out with a pencil first if you're a little bit nervous about the eyes. But they're just two little ovals. They're just above the top of his cheeks and then on the above the nose, but they kind of line up to the outside edges of the oval of his nose. I'm going to load my paint palette with some fresh white. I'm going to do his eyebrows next. So you want a clean, rinsed off number 4 round brush, and we're going to do 2 eyebrow shapes. They are going to be kind of angling this way. This one's going to be angling this way, and the other one's going to be angling the opposite direction. So just little kind of curved strokes to create some bushy eyebrows. And these are just below his hat. And if you want to, you can add a little bit of shadowing on the bottom of the eyebrows with black. So without rinsing, add just a little kind of dot of black onto your brush. On the bottom of the eyebrows is where the shadow would be, and you just want to kind of drag it in a little bit on the bottom of each of the eyebrows. I'm going to rinse my brush off to get the black off, and then I'm going to go back to white and do one little white dot in the kind of upper right area of each of the ovals to give Santa a little highlight in his eyes. And then also a little highlight on the left part of his lip. And then I'm going to do something that might be optional if you don't want to do this. I'm going to go and add some texture on his mustache, specifically along the edging. So now that we're done with everything under the mustache, we can go back and we can add some little textured hair pieces that are kind of sticking up, and those pieces overlap parts of the background, overlap parts of his cheek, overlap down here. So I'm just dragging little curved lines to go outside the lines of that mustache. So a little bit kind of overlaps the opening of his mouth. You don't want to make them too big. We're not trying to change the entire shape of the mustache. We're just adding little textured hair pieces that are sticking out and overlapping anything that's kind of under it. And you're going to do the same type of texture thing to the beard. So taking the little white lines, having them go outside the lines and kind of overlap parts of the sleeve. And next, I am going to switch to a round bristle brush for texture work on his sleeve cuffs, the circle part of his hat, the lining of his hat. So this is a brush that I got, I think at Michael's. It was a pack of brushes that were all wooden, and the bristles, they're like a kind of a natural stiff type of bristle, which allows you to use it to stamp to create texture. So I'm only loading little bits of white paint on the end of this and I'm stamping it. And you want to go outside the lines a little bit, and that kind of creates that fuzzy texture. Um, some of your shading, so because we did the shading earlier, you want to make sure that you're not covering, like over here, you want to apply this like very lightly so that you still see some of that dark shading shadowing under the hat or on the bottom of the hat. And you're just stamping it. So see how this, when you go outside the lines a little bit, it gives it that fuzzy texture. Go outside the lines over the black background area as well. And be careful not to add too much paint to your brush, or otherwise it'll just get very thick and it won't create that texture. If you have any kind of round flat brush that has stiff bristles, that would work for this. You can try it with Q-tips, like a bundle of Q-tips, although the circles of the Q-tips might be too big for this. You could even try it with a flat brush and just stamp the end of the flat brush. Just make sure you're only adding little small amounts of paint to your brush, or even try it dry brush style. And do the same thing to the circle. Again, we added shading there for a reason, so make sure that a lot of that darker part still kind of shows through, or don't put too much on the darker part. Have a little bit go outside the lines, and that creates that fuzzy texture. And then you want to do the same thing to this part of his sleeve. Go outside the lines a little bit to create the fuzzy texture. You can even kind of squeeze your bristles. So see how I'm kind of like pinching the bristles here so I can get into that kind of the edging of his sleeve and make it more of the shape that I want it to be. Next, I'm going to paint the bow on top of the present. So I'm going to rinse off that bristle brush and go back to my round brush. If you want to, you can draw the bow out first with like a pencil or even a paint pen. I'm actually going to draw or paint the vertical part of this ribbon first, where it's wrapped around the present. So I just took that and lined it up to the edge of the canvas, and then used the full width of the brush to paint a vertical rectangle shape. This is just the red. If you need to add a little bit of white to the red, you can. Adding white to the red helps it to stand out and also gives it a little bit of a shiny look. So I added a little bit of white to the corner of the left side of the brush and made the ribbon a little bit shiny on the left. And then you want to repeat that for the top part of the present. So you're just painting another vertical mark right here. If you want to change the color of that a little bit, so I'm adding a little bit of black and kind of making the bottom part, the top part and bottom part a little bit shadowy. I'm going to switch to my 4 rounds so that I could outline this bottom part of the box and maybe kind of touch up the edging of his mittens with white, little white outlining. I did black at first, but black didn't really show up. A little bit of white outlining kind of gets that to pop a little bit better. So you see the edging of his mittens. And now I'm going to start painting the bow in. So using the round brush and red, start by painting a little kind of almost like a square, but the corners are rounded. And that rests right on the top edge of the present. And then your little bow shape is almost like painting a triangle, but it bows inward, and then you're painting that in solid red. So you're going to do that on both sides. And then the shading and highlighting is going to give it that kind of three-dimensional bow look. So let's do the shadowing next. Without rinsing the brush, grab black on your brush. So I have red and black on my brush. And right up here, we have like a little sort of kind of oval shape, and over here as well on that top edge of the bow. So that's kind of the inner top part of the bow. It's more like a teardrop shape because it goes to a point in the center towards the center part of the bow. And then rinse the brush, grab your red, and then do bow tie. So this one's just kind of going down at an angle and splits. So the ends of the bow ties are kind of pointed. And yours might be going a different direction. It kind of just depends on where Santa's gloves are. I didn't want to overlap the gloves, so I kind of made them kind of go around, or made them so they were overlapping the gloves. Add a little bit of white in there to highlight that. It also helps that shape stand out a little bit better with that little bit of white. And then right here, I'm highlighting that center part just on the left part and kind of dragged that white inwards. And then over here on the far left edge, I'm outlining that with the white and then dragging it inwards. So it's allowing that bow to be light on the edges. I'm going to do the same thing over here. Outline and just kind of gently drag that white. So if your white's showing up too bright, mix a little bit of red into it so it's kind of red and white mixed together, a lighter shade of red. And you don't want it to be too bright. Rinse the brush and grab your black again, and we're going to go back and do some more dark color work. So right here is dark, and right here I'm dragging little tiny black strokes on the kind of the inner part of the bow. Create a little bit of shadow in that area, and then a little bit of outline under your circle center, and a little bit of shadowing at the top part of those ribbon ties. Next, we're going to do something really fun. We're going to do the blurry bokeh lights in the background of Santa. And you can certainly skip this step, but I really think this adds to like the magic of the painting because you have the colorful lights in the background. And this is the first time we're using Cad Yellow light in our paint palettes. So loaded that up, and I'm going to use my index finger to paint these little blurry lights. So I'm going to load only a small amount, like a little dot of paint on my finger. Start out by kind of pressing a little bit and then blurring that outwards. So that is going to create a blurry light. And you want to just keep doing this technique and kind of changing this. So some lights are small, some are a little bit bigger. They might be overlapping each other. They might be close together. They might be far away. So you really want to think about variety in this. I'm going to do colorful lights. However, if you want to just do yellow and white lights, you can. I am mixing a little bit of white with that yellow, and that allows that yellow to kind of give it some variation. And then we can make colors. We can mix blue and yellow together to make green lights. You can use blue. When you do this, and if a color doesn't show up, I recommend just adding a little bit of white into the color, and that really kind of brightens that up. And then have a towel handy. So I'm holding a towel in my left hand so I can wipe my finger off every time I change colors. But also when you load it, wipe a little bit off on the towel, because the trick with this is you don't want a lot of paint on your finger. You just want a very, very small amount, and that helps to create that blurry light effect You want it to be bright and kind of solid in the middle, and as you're smearing it outwards, you're kind of releasing the pressure of your finger, and that allows that circle to be blurry on the edges. So just keep going. You can decide maybe you only want a few blurry lights and you like the simplicity of that, or if you really like this, you can just add lights everywhere. If you want to make it look like lights are kind of going behind Santa's hat, you can overlap the light and then go back and kind of repaint part of the hat that you might have overlapped. So like right here, I go like this and overlap it. You can go back and repaint so it looks like the light is going behind his hat. And you can do a few lights that are maybe super dim, so maybe only add a little bit of paint to your finger and kind of smear it so it only shows up a little bit and makes it look like that light is dim or further away. And I'm going to do the holly next. So with the number 4 round brush, let's make green. So let's mix Cad Yellow Light with Light Blue Permanent. It makes this really fun, bright, sort of lime green color, and we're going to use that for the base of our holly leaf. It's going to be nice and bright, especially in this area we're going to paint it in because it's kind of a dark area right here. So I'm going to use the round brush to kind of draw out the shape of the holly leaf. So I do the outer edges, they're kind of like the scalloped edges. And then once you have the shape drawn out, you're just filling it in. So I'm doing a little bit of color variation with this. When I go to reload, I might grab maybe a little bit more blue. So it's more of a bluish color, or more yellow at times, make it more of a yellow color, and just let it kind of blend right on the canvas. If you like that style, you can do that too, or you could just paint this solid color without blending on the canvas. Next, I'm going to dry this so that I can paint the berries for the holly. So quick dry with a blow dryer, and then using the number 4 round brush and the red, I'm going to do 3 circles for the berries. And these are going to kind of slightly overlap each other. Those need to dry before we can highlight them. I am going to get my paint pen next, and I'm going to do the little snowflake detail on the present. If you don't want to do this, you don't have to, or you want to add like a different pattern to your present, you can, but I found it a lot easier to do this with the paint pen. You can also do this with a little round brush and white paint, but I'm just going to draw little simple snowflakes on the dark blue part of the present. And this is a fine tip white paint pen. And I'm going to just kind of add little snowflakes everywhere, just on the dark blue part. You can have some that are maybe partially visible because the ribbon covers up half of it, or some that are kind of behind his mitten or going off the edge of the present. And then for the light blue part, I'm just going to do little polka dots. And now, while I still have the white paint pen in my hand, I'm going to do a little bit of outlining work with this. I'm going to loosely outline the bottom of this present. And by loosely, I mean that that line is not continuous. It's almost like I'm doing a dashed line. I'm holding this pen very lightly, and I'm not allowing that line to be continuous. It's very loose, broken, because of how I'm holding it very lightly. I'm not pressing down the entire way. So I did that around his belt, around the mittens, and the bottom part of the present. Next, I'm going to switch to the black paint pen, and I'm going to do some outline work along some of the edges of the mustache, specifically on the bottom. Just loosely add some textured lines. And again, this is optional if you don't like how this looks. A little bit of outlining on the top edges of his mustache, and a little bit of outlining on the far left and right edges of his beard. I'm going to outline the bottom of the nose, and then maybe the bottom part of his lip. I'm going to do a little bit of outlining on the hat, but I'm just going to do these in very loose, sort of kind of wavy lines that are also broken. Same with the ball of his hat and his sleeves. Very loose, kind of sketchy, wavy-like lines. I'm also going to outline the edges of the holly. You don't even have to completely stay inside the line or have the line outline the entire edging of it. It's okay if some of that green ends up going outside the line. And then we can take our white and our brush and highlight the berries, and then outline the outer edges of those berries. And then the one last final detail that I'm going to do is splatter some little white specks all over this. So I'm going to take white and a toothbrush, and I'm going to add a little bit of water to the brush, kind of test it out first to make sure it's not too thick, not too thin. But adding that all over really adds that kind of extra sparkle, and some pieces show up over the gloves, and that's okay. And we are done painting Jolly Santa. Hope you enjoyed this one. Thanks for watching, and thanks for painting with me.